Well, for the final 45 minutes of this morning's record review, we're going to be concentrating on one composer, Giuseppe Verdi, two conductors, Wilhelm Furtwängler and Herbert von Karajan, and some of the leading singers of the 1950s and early 1960s. John Deathridge will be joining me in a moment to discuss the discs. And the records, well, they're all live from the Salzburg Festival. The inclusion of Italian operas in the Salzburg Festival has always provoked controversy. Mozart and Richard Strauss, it's widely assumed, are the presiding deities. Yet the very first fully fledged festival in 1925 included, of all things, Donizetti's Don Pasquale, conducted by Bruno Walter. It's true that the important Verdi revival that took place in Austria and Germany in the late 1920s didn't immediately affect the Salzburg Festival, but then in 1934, Salzburg landed a prize valuable beyond their wildest dreams, Toscanini. In 1935, he made his operatic debut in Salzburg with Verdi's Falstaff. Incidentally, one of the repetiteurs on the festival staff was the young Herbert von Karajan. If he wasn't playing, he was watching and listening. Furtwängler didn't conduct at the festival until 1937, and when he did, he stuck to German repertory. So it was all the more surprising when, in the autumn of 1950, he astonished the festival authorities by announcing that the following year, the 50th anniversary of Verdi's death, he wanted to conduct Verdi's Otello. A case, in part at least, I suspect, of anything Toscanini can do, I can do just as well. The cast assembled by Salzburg was an interesting mix. Ramon Vinay as Otello, he'd recorded it with Toscanini in 1947, a homegrown Iago from the Vienna Opera, Paul Schöffler, and as Desdemona, a brilliant young Yugoslav soprano, Dragica Martinez. Dragica Martinez and Ramon Vinay as Desdemona and Otello in Furtwängler's 1951 Salzburg production of Otello. That was part of the love duet, recorded live in what's now the smaller of the two festival halls. I've been joined by John Deathridge. She was not very well known. She had rather a short career, Martinez. She's often thought to be the weakness of the set.
I can understand that. In the fourth act, for instance, in the Ave Maria, she becomes very sentimental in the voice, and it's kitsch, really. I think she's also encouraged by Furtwängler in that. There is this sentimental side to Furtwängler, which I think comes out in the recording. One has the feeling also it's the kind of Italian opera the Austrians like to hear. It's the Austrian conception of what Italian opera should sound like. On the other hand, I can understand why Furtwängler was attracted to Otello, particularly in the figure of Iago, who has nothing to do with Shakespeare, naturally. It's the line of dissent comes really from Mephistopheles, from Goethe.
And also kind of Renaissance Machiavellism.
Yes, that too. But there is a kind of Germanic element that comes through Boito, who of course himself wrote an opera on Mephistopheles. And that aspect of the work comes across very well. Also the harmonic richness of the work and the structural depth of the work comes out very well. And
they do actually have a German-speaking Iago in Paul Schöffler. I didn't always think that he understood the Italian text very well.
No, I don't think he does. I think it's shall we say, a gestural performance. I mean, I think the accent on death and the accent on the darkness is slightly overdone. But again, Furtwängler encourages him.
And it's a wonderful voice, isn't it? Schöffler at the start of the Credo. Furtwängler's conducting, it seems to me to be wonderfully not only organic but also very dark. It's almost, apart from Barbarolli, I don't remember anybody making this score seem as dark, as claustrophobic. And apparently in the small Festspiele house in Salzburg, it's rather narrow focus on the stage. It was a very intimate, very tense drama in the theatre.
Yes, I think the key, as always with Furtwängler, is not that he conducts very slow, but that he also conducts very fast and creates a tension between extremes of tempo.
And very deep as well.
And very deep. What's interesting about this recording is where a tempo change, a very exact tempo change, is required from the score, he does that very well, but never loses sight of a kind of background tempo that he has in mind over a long range. This is actually quite difficult to demonstrate in a short example, but there is one, I think, from Otello's soliloquy in Act 3, and the example you're now going to hear is just 2 minutes long, but in this example it is as if you go through an entire world of feeling, because Furtwängler has judged the tempo so correctly. When Iago comes in at the end of the soliloquy, there's this change of tempo, but you never lose the basic, shall we say, tempo beat behind. So one gets a really good sense of this claustrophobia of Otello and a sense of his inner turmoil in what's going on inside his brain.
And this is Ramon Vinay, I think probably more mature as an artist than he was for the Toscanini recording. I mean, he's a fine Otello, isn't he?
He's a fine Otello. The pushed-up baritone sound, because he was a baritone who's become a tenor here, tends to sound a little stiff for my feeling, but it gives the role a weight and also some kind of awkwardness, which I think is actually quite suitable.
Wonderful multispective stage drama from Furtwängler, with Ramon Vinay as Otello. Is this a complete recording which you would want on your shelves?
I think so.
I mean, it's, there's the famous Toscanini and the Seraphim with Vickers and so on, but it does, I think it did, to me, add a dimension, and the Barbarolli recording is not really satisfactory with Fischer-Dieskau and McCracken.
No.
And I think this is a great representative of the German tradition of performing it.
Yes, I think, apart from the sentimental moments, I think it is definitely a very valuable addition to the library.
Well, it's 2 CDs from EMI at mid-price with the number CHS5 657512. CHS5 657512. Well, Furtwängler died in 1954, which allowed the dreaded K to return to Salzburg in 1957 when Karajan became artistic director of the festival. He'd been kept up by Furtwängler. And one of the first things he did in the old Rocky riding school, the Felsenreitschule, was a production of Verdi's Don Carlo. In some ways, it was quite old-fashioned. In fact, doing it in the Felsenreitschule, where Karajan had worked with Reinhardt on Faust in the 1930s, and he also had a producer who he'd worked with in the 1930s, Gustav Gründgens. It was quite old-fashioned, old text, four-act Italian, no Fontainebleau scene, and yet he had a very good young cast, quite similar in some ways to the Covent Garden cast at the time. Siepi as the king. I mean, how do you find the cast in the context of this rather old-fashioned production?
Well, I think the cast is brilliant. Siepi, of course, was also Don Giovanni under Furtwängler, so
that's
he
where
was
he
very
made his
well
name,
known.
yes.
That's where he made his name, so he's well known. Bastianini as Rodrigo. I think the whole policy of Karajan of taking singers from La Scala at the time, having Italian singers to perform in Salzburg in an Italian work that has, of course, again, very clear German connections, because the original is, of course, by a German. This combination works extremely well in this recording. Although he has Rodrigo with dark-coloured voices, there's a certain vitality and certainly a lightness to the performance, which I don't get in Karajan's later performances. It's still got really quite a lot of vitality.
Yes, that later EMI, Don Carlos, is very heavy, isn't it?
It is very heavy. It gets too glossy.
Yeah.
But this has a freshness about it, which I think makes the recording, this historic recording, really quite an important one.
Well, this is the part of the end of Act 1 with Siepi and Bastianini. Karajan and the Vienna Philharmonic at the end of Act 1 of Verdi's Don Carlo with Cesare Siepi and Ettore Bastianini. Siepi was adored not only by Karajan and Furtwängler but by Urinats. I remember she told me that he was the great bass baritone of his period. We loved singing with him, wonderful legato. And she is the one singer, as Elisabetta on this set, who is not Italian. And this was at a time when her career, I mean, she was famous, wasn't she, for her Strauss and her Mozart?
Yes.
And Karajan suddenly asked her to do Italian repertoire, for which she was very, very grateful. How do you find her, Elisabetta?
Well, she's brilliant. I mean, the voice is in brilliant form. I have one or two objections, though, to the way Karajan accompanies her. I know one says that the singers at that time all felt that they were in very safe hands with Karajan, and he provided this wonderful, gorgeous bed of sound. But in her prayer, for example, in the last act, I mean, the violins introducing her voice, I think, are a little bit too sumptuous and Hollywood. This is ironic, because Karajan liked Verdi, was very grateful to Verdi, because when he was in Ulm and only had about 6 first violins, he said, well, he could still do Verdi.
Balanced an orchestra with Verdi and Mozart.
But after that, he seemed intent on increasing the violin sound much more, which I think doesn't fit.
Well, I just wonder also whether here, it's a very vivid illustration of this, to some extent it may be the Felsenreich-Schuler acoustic, because it actually is a very strange acoustic, and I think it adds to this sense of gloss. Anyway, let's hear it. In a year, and that's in glorious voice, says Elisabetta. Okay, glossy violins at the start, but could anybody else, probably apart from the late lamented Wilhelm Furtwängler, have sustained the voice at that slow tempo?
No, the accompaniment is pretty good. I mean, when I said that about the violins at the start, I'm really trying to say that this is the beginning of, I think, rather an unfortunate development in Karajan's recordings of Italian opera. Fortunately, it's held in check here, but I think later on it does become too glossy.
I thought that in the end the performance was less than the sum of its parts.
Yes, I think that might be Verdi's fault, it might be Karajan's fault. I can't really make a judgment on that. I think overall, though, the performance with this very good cast makes a profound impression. You can understand when you hear it, even though you don't have the Fontainebleau act at the start, it's the 4-act version, why people say that Don Carlos is the greatest opera in the 19th century. You can understand that when you hear this recording.
Well, you won't get it on 2 CDs because it's cut, and the 2 CDs are extremely well filled, so it's quite a bargain. Deutsche Grammophon 447 6552, 447 6552. Now, Karajan made a very famous recording of Verdi's Il Trovatore in 1956, La Scala Milan, with Maria Callas, Rolando Panerai, Giuseppe Di Stefano, and he did it at the Salzburg Festival in 1962 with an equally distinguished cast, a very different type of cast, Leontine Price as Leonora, Simeonata in the key role of Azucena, the young Franco Corelli as Manrico, and again Bastianini. And I saw this in the theatre, and it was, I remember the darkness of the staging. I mean, it was Karajan at his most crepuscular. But it was, I thought, a thrilling performance. How do you find it?
I find this not so thrilling. Well, of course, hearing the recording is not the same thing as hearing it in the theatre, but from the recording, I found it simply too heavy-handed. I mean, I think that the tempi are too slow, and it's something that one normally accuses Furtwängler of doing. But it's the bloated sound that I didn't like. Again, I think it's what the Austrians wanted to hear Italian opera, because the Italians themselves do these tempi actually much faster. It's actually much more brittle.
That's not true, because the Giulini recording, which I greatly admire, is actually slower than Karajan and also with fuller textures.
I'm talking really about the local sort of Italian Kapellmeister, not the international.
But I found there's a strong element of Toscanini in this performance. But I mean, it's
yes, I didn't hear that so much.
No.
I think I think one of the troubles is that Karajan lets the singers get away with too much. He gives them too much their head, and it's generally too sumptuous and too loud, which is something about Trovatore which is there anyway. You don't actually have to.
But what about Simeonata? I mean,
well, she's very good, except again she seems to be dragged down by too slow a tempo. For instance, in the famous narration where she's trying to explain about her mother's murder and whether Manrico is her son or not, Karajan starts the famous A minor passage, I think, much too slowly. It does actually gather pace later on, but to me this is...
But isn't it a dream narration, rather like Lady Macbeth's sleepwalking scene? Isn't there a sense of inwardness?
Yes, I quite agree with that, but I have the feeling here that it's too heavy. It's verging on deadness to me, which I don't think is quite right.
Simeonata's a real star in this performance. I think there's tremendous pathos in that extract. But the weakness for me, this question of slow tempi in Il Balan, Bastianini, by this stage in his career, just simply couldn't sustain it.
No, that is the real weakness of the recording, yes. It's almost embarrassing.
And yet a wonderful Leontine Price and very good Corelli.
Yes, Leontine Price is almost too wonderful, though, isn't she? I mean, the voice is so magnificent, it bowls you over. I think, again, you get this problem with Salzburg of what I call the voice fetishism. You know, the voice, becomes too much the voice.
But she was a great Leonora, wasn't she?
Oh, she was. I'm not denying that at all. It just seems to overshadow everything else, And Trovatore is, after all, a piece to be taken serious dramaturgically, although...
That's what I thought about this performance, that when I got to the end, I felt I'd been through a very dark experience, not through some flashy thing that would have appealed to canary fancies.
I did have the feeling of a vocal parade, I'm afraid.
Well, let's hear a complete scene. We can hear the second scene of Act One, and we hear... three of the four principal players. We hear Leonora, the Count, and Manrico. The scene begins with Leonora's cavatina, Tacea la Notte, and ends with a great three-way confrontation between the characters, the Count and Manrico, locking horns over Leonora like a couple of rutting stags.
No retarda, vieni Io ti vedo che tu mi intenda,
It well. Leontine Price as Leonora, Franco Corelli as Manrico, and Ettore Bastianini as Count de Luna, live at the 1962 Salzburg Festival, with Herbert von Karajan conducting the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra. This is an Austrian radio recording, mono but very vivid, and now available at mid-price on 2 Deutsche Grammophon CDs, with the set number 447-6592, 447-6592. Don't forget that Karajan's earlier studio recording with Maria Callas as Leonora, made at La Scala Milan, is still available on 2 EMI CDs. But this Salzburg Festival version is also pretty remarkable, not least for the performances of Leontine Price and for Simeonata, a great azucena, and I think never heard to better effect on record than here. I was talking earlier to John Deathridge. Next week, after Stephen Dodgson and Dvorak's A Major String Sextet in Building a Library, we've one of our live studio discussions of new releases. Edward Greenfield and Robert Cowan will be joining me to discuss new records of 20th century orchestral music. And after that, there'll be a chance to hear more from some of those records in an extended record release.